Oh, it's out of juice. It's fine. Yeah, what's a good example? Yeah, if Deep Rock Galactic charged twice as much for a quote-unquote host copy, that, you know, hey, well, maybe not twice as much, but like an extra $10 or something like that. Just like a little bit extra to justify it, but effectively say, hey, you are host, you get to host for your friend group. They don't need to buy the game, they just download the, I mean, honestly, they could even frame it within the game of, like, name it after... What's the name of their handler? I forget the name of him. But, you know, effectively have your kind of middle management edition, which is they can give everybody else a copy so they can play it together. So as long as you have one person that has the host DLC, no one else needs to buy it. And I'm sure in, like, Deep Rock's case, they get by fine because the game is fantastic. But, like, what's a good example? I would absolutely, for, like, Valheim, for example. What if there was, like, the Odin edition that straight up just lets you host a server that anybody can join for free without needing to buy the game? And, you know, maybe the Odin server is, like, you know, $60, $100 or something like that. Ow. Holy shit, that hurt. You know, mark it up a little bit just to justify the extra cost. But then make it something that, you know, that the one friend that has the nice job or the disposable allowance or the extra income or less bills can effectively buy a copy without having to buy copies for all of his friends. Because that was something I always ran into, specifically with YouTube. Back in the day, back when I used to play a lot of Gmod stuff, I bought a lot of people Gmod. And Steam specifically made it so I couldn't buy 4-packs if I already owned the game. I think that's just kind of their base policy, which, like, it makes sense. The tragedy on that is that I effectively, to have enough copies for all of my friends to play Gmod with me, I'd have to constantly buy just loads of spare copies of Gmod whenever it went on sale. Because I knew there was always going to be that one friend that didn't have Gmod, or, you know, a basic source engine game to get all the extra asset packs. And I couldn't, like, ask them to buy it because, like, you know, we were all just broke kids, effectively. You know, young adults. Many of us without jobs or still in college or just got out of college. And so, like, me being the one person with the job, it's like, okay, fine. I'll be the one to pick it up. No biggie. Assume that the middle management version would be a subscription. I guess. I prefer not to have that, though, just because, like, I'm fine with that if the middle management version was, like, was for, like, them hosting a server for you. But historically, I don't like it when games charge a subscription cost just so I can host. That always feels gross to me. Like, you can swing that if you're Bethesda and you have enough fans that will, you know, sub into it anyway. But I think for most end users, they would see an indie developer doing that and be like, no thank you. And then the game would die. I don't know. A lot of different ways that it could be done, and I'm curious to see where the industry goes with it, because I feel like there's a lot of interesting wiggle room. Oh, sweet Bessie, this is why I want the plasma launcher. I feel like there's a lot of potential wiggle room for some really, really interesting payment systems that are holistic. And, like, actually consumer-friendly. But I'm pretty sure these are all going to be pioneered by freaking Ubisoft, who's just going to milk it for all it's worth. And maybe Ubisoft is finally learning that, like, people aren't super interested. I don't know. I don't think so. I feel weird. I still haven't played Watch Dogs Legion or Immortals Phoenix Rising. And, like, I feel like before I can criticize Ubisoft, I need to actually play some real Ubisoft games. All of the Ubisoft games I play are, like, Rayman Origins and Grow Home, Grow Up, and Child of Light. I'm just saying big business would corrupt the good and profit where it may. I feel like with indie gaming, you can kind of avoid a lot of that. That so many of them are just homegrown, home office developers, that as long as it's not AAA pioneering some of these ideas, you actually have a lot of potential without the risks of full exploitation. There absolutely are going to be indie developers that exploit people to that extent. Looking at you, Day of Dragons. But, like, that was a scam right out, as opposed to, you know, any specifically unique marketing. That was just somebody that figured out what people really wanted and then promised them that at the potential cost of shit tons of money. And then, as far as I know, took the money and run. Or took the money and ran. Like, I don't know if anybody follows or followed Day of Dragons, but I'm 99% certain there's been like no development on it since last year when the Kickstarter launched and everybody was angry about it. If it's an online game like Fallout 76, a private game should be included in the base price, as it does not cost much more than the public game. Single-player game that offers online gameplay on the server almost needs to be a cost to keep the servers on. I think it depends on the game a little bit. Personally, I would always be in favor of, like, shiny cosmetics than a sub fee. Because I used to play World of Warcraft, and the sub fee for it always just felt kind of... Like, it was okay back when World of Warcraft was, like, top dog. But nowadays, it just felt kind of meh. Especially because, like, the game got more and more bloated over time and not less. And so, like, you know, if you're running an online-only game... Oh, what's a good example? Oh, here's one. Astroneer. Lovely game. Costs, what, 20 bucks? And they recently added a cash shop system with just some basic aesthetic DLC that you can buy to let them develop the game further. I think they might end up doing some paid DLC as well. I'm not really sure. But, like, that game came out how long ago? A while back. And so if they wanted to charge, like, 10 bucks for, like, a sweet skin that I can unlock, that they can keep going and developing the game that they... Well, I'm tripping over my own tongue. You know, if they want to charge that much just so they can keep developing the game for that much longer or work on something new, I don't think I'm going to look down on them for that. But I would certainly be mad if they're like, hey, 10 bucks a month? Personally, I almost feel like, Steam... I don't necessarily want to say that, like, Steam should maybe look into having, kind of its own Patreon equivalent, but I'm a patron of a couple of game developers, specifically the, Demon Crawl devs. Because I think Demon Crawl is an absolutely genius game. And, you know, I like what they're doing, and I support it. And so, yeah, I am subbed to them currently on Patreon. I'll probably unsub at some point. But I would not mind it if Steam had an integration where it's like, yeah, just pay like a couple bucks a month to this developer and maybe trade for like a perk or like an early access to a thing or who knows what. Because there's a lot of smaller games that I personally would have paid more for if I could. Hollow Knight, easiest example I can think of. I paid... well, I didn't pay anything for Hollow Knight, but... Like, they charged 15 bucks for Hollow Knight. Like, that's highway robbery on themselves. And you know what? They made it work because the game itself is, like, mad successful, and go figure. It did so well. People can pick it up for 15 bucks and not at all feel like, oh man, this game was terrible. Why did I spend 15 bucks on it? It's like, oh, maybe this game's not for me. Oh well, it was only 15 bucks. Like, that's, to some degree, marketing genius, but also, like, the game is 100% worth more than that. I'm surprised Steam doesn't have a Patreon-esque thing yet. But if there's any company other than, well, if it was any other company than Valve, the structure leads to a lot of confusion and lack of direction. It's what happens when you have more money than sense. This happens with most big companies that are effectively stable in their revenue. Look at Google, for example. They don't know what the hell they're doing with anything anymore, but they succeed because the things that matter still work fine. And will continue to work fine potentially forever. You know, I can't really see Google's advertising platform failing on them at any point in time. That, like, realistically, that's going to be their cash cow. And that lets them effectively make Stadia without actually, you know, running the risk of shutting down because Stadia failed. And who knows, maybe Stadia will actually turn into something useful. And good, in the end. I am straight up a Stadia partner, I guess, and, like, let me tell you, my confidence is low. They sent me a sweet blanket and a really stinky hoodie, though, but, you know, beyond that, what they should have done was effectively just crowdfunded a bunch of indie developers and said, like, hey, we'll give you funding if you release on Stadia, like, 2 weeks early, before anything else. As just kind of like marketing for Stadia. I mean, it doesn't have to be 2 weeks early. But I feel like 2 weeks would be enough that the usual crowd that's like, oh, exclusives, would pretty much have zero complaints. And enough people could be kind of swayed over. The other thing that could have worked really well with Stadia is if they had specifically marketed it as a, like, hey, play your PC games on your mobile device. Because I think you can. Like, that is how it functions to some degree. I haven't bothered, because it doesn't seem like it's worth it. I love the idea of Stadia. I'm not convinced the product is worth it. Even putting aside the issue with the internet connection in the US. Yeah, that's part of the issue on my end. It's that my internet isn't quite good enough for Stadia. I could potentially pay more to get Stadia to work, but eh. Hey, thank you, Mini Murgle, for the 500 bits. Been down with a cold all week. Keep falling asleep in my computer chair, and my butt hurts for it. You got a comfy bed that you can watch from? Or hang out in? Because, like, I don't know about you guys. When I'm sick, I will actually sit in my computer chair anyway, just because, like, I'm so bored. Otherwise, like, getting sick is the only time I think I ever get bored. As someone who can't buy a new GPU to replace his old GTX 680, if I had more time for gaming, I'd definitely consider Stadia right now. Yeah. Because, like, the idea of it is fine. You know, if I wasn't playing high-end gaming specifically for the purpose of streaming and YouTube, I think I would actually consider Stadia more, or a Stadia equivalent, just in terms of, like, set me up with a netbook, maybe hook it up to a better monitor, and just play whatever game I want without having to download it, worry about space, worry about performance. Like, the only real issue is just the internet connection. And, I mean, who knows, we might actually get lucky in the next couple of years and have proper municipal internet pop up. That's such a dream. 40 bucks a month for just pure gigabit, no worrying about Comcast, no worry about shitty ISPs, doing shitty things with hidden extra fees and all sorts of garbage. Like, there's a lot of different ways that you could do it. But the problem is, especially with like how the PC market is, Steam, I'm almost gonna say inadvertently created this this environment where people inherently like refuse to consider other platforms because honestly, for a while, Steam was so beloved, and I think to some degree it's justified. That Steam is incredibly consumer-friendly. Specifically the sales. Like, I think if Steam had never done their Steam sales, people wouldn't care nearly as much. But because the Steam sales, especially back in the, like, early to mid-2010s, where, yeah, you could get all those games that you've been wanting for years. You can get them for like $5-10 a piece. Like suddenly suddenly that just skyrockets everything into the stratosphere. Just want some competition for ISPs. All I can get is Comcast. I got really lucky that my rental house has a like a private internet provider that specifically services effectively gated neighborhoods and, like, pre-built neighborhoods with HOAs and stuff. It's a neat system and works really well for me. Unfortunately, their gigabit option effectively, you have to pay $40 a month to get gigabit. And they took down their payment website, and so I'd have to pay them monthly by phone, which involves calling them and then waiting for a call from their billing department to actually, you know, send over the payment information. I did that for like 2 months and then said, nope, I'm not doing this anymore. You know, email me once your website's actually functional, and I will go back to paying you $40 a month. And it's been almost a year and they still haven't fixed up their website. It's baffling. I think the answer is they just don't get a whole lot of consumer-grade subscriptions for gigabit, so they don't really care. Boy, I should probably heal soon. I'm dying. Let's hit the door. Ugh, should probably get the better medkits. Also, the refund policy is extremely generous on Steam. Yup. It's pretty generous. But I feel like anybody that wants to compete with Steam at this point effectively is going to have to, like, it's not an uphill battle, that's an up-cliff battle. Like, that's so ridiculously hard to compete with that, like, I don't envy most developers, most platforms for trying. Like, I know it's in vogue to hate on Epic, but it is impressive that they managed to steal enough of the market that they actually have some viability. And you really would have to do exactly what Epic does to be able to pull people away. You know, equal parts just handing out free games, just left and right, and also snagging enough exclusives to kind of justify the platform existing beyond Steam. Ooh, shit, I got contaminated. That would explain why I'm losing HP. Didn't it take a long battle between the EU and Valve to get a refund policy? Yes. Yeah, Valve didn't come up with that. They can take the credit for it, and they can take the credit for it being as functional as it is. But I will say straight up that they had very little hand in the actual creation of that policy, or... Okay, let's grab the plasma launcher. Okay, let's toss everything in here. Yeah, otherwise, the only other way that I could feasibly see anyone managing to compete with Steam would be by doing special things. Did I not make that? I guess I must have. Oh, we need more yttrium, though. Are we not processing? Let's see. We need a lot of xenotime ore. I don't know what else we need. I'm just gonna queue up a bunch of stuff to process. And then we'll go pass out, because my character is very tired. Holy crap, that decontamination pill is shockingly effective. Oh, I should have done this a while ago. Oh well, it's fine. There we go. What else do we need? At this point, nothing to research. We'll be okay. Bed's down here. Perfect. But you'd have to do what itch.io does, where you specifically promote like small indie games that are still in development and stuff before they ever even hit Steam. Like, that's one way to survive. And then the other would be good old games, which is just have old games. That's another thing. Let's see. Epic gains so much in other ways that a 5 million loss with EGS is nothing to them, so they'll continue tossing money, which is horrible because they poison the market with their blanket checks for exclusives instead of, you know, being good. See, the thing is, though, like, if Epic games were just good, no one would use them. But, like, that's always the sticking point with this argument, is that would any of you ever switch to another platform other than Steam, unless it came out that that Gabe Newell is like an actual cannibal? Like, it would take a lot for me to switch away from Steam on moral reasons. Or ethical reasons. The only other way that I could see being mad at Steam would straight up being like, hey, Steam is straight up like screwing over a bunch of developers with like a really garbage deal. And like straight up stole a game from some poor developer. Like, that there's not a whole lot that could actually get me to sit down and say like, yeah, I would not use Steam anymore. Because, yeah, Steam is all I know. Steam is a benevolent dictator so far. And so the problem is, like, so many people, I think, inherently just would refuse to switch because why? You know, why split your library? Which is still kind of worth it because, you know, if for some reason Steam ever went down someday, half of us would suddenly have 0 video games. Or would only have video games on... Oh, can I make the reactor module 3s now? Yes. You know, so many of us would suddenly be quite gameless, and that would be frustrating. But, yeah, if Gabe became Notch, I'd probably leave. But otherwise, like, as long as Steam doesn't have any major controversies, nobody's ever gonna hate Steam. Everybody's gonna just stick with Steam for the most part. And so, like, even if Epic Games was good, like an actually fantastic platform with good content all around, I'm pretty sure people would actually just stick to Steam. And it would be more of a waste of money than what they're currently doing. And I realize that this is, like... Am I making the wrong heatsink here? No, those are probably just spare ones that I looted. I realize that, once again, in vogue to just hate on the platform, but people are, like, super set in their ways. Like, how many of you guys still use Google to search for things? And how many of you guys use DuckDuckGo? Or... I'm not actually sure if there are any other viable search engines. Yeah, there's also Bing and Yahoo. That's a good point. But, like, how many of you guys mostly just use Google? Because I know some people probably do actually use DuckDuckGo. I try, but I forget. just because, you know, it's not a huge priority for me. But, like, straight up, Google and Bing and, like, a bunch of these search engines are not, like, actually good for people. They very much are just gathering data and then selling it to the highest bidder. And I know there are laws that are coming out recently that are specifically going to try and nip this in the bud, but there's still this very much, like, I'm not going to say an overarching opinion, but, like, overarching problem with data harvesting and selling and so on and so forth. But most people will still probably stick with Google just because it's convenient. And so it's much the same problem with so many of these issues, is that realistically, like, the value proposition of convenience is high. And it takes a lot to get people to switch away from that. To even consider an alternative option. And so, I guess what so many people perceive as underhanded, in a lot of cases, in my opinion, I would actually argue are necessary to even just succeed. Or exist? I don't know. Let's see. Is that a good reason for not having a fully functional store and focus on exclusives only? I mean, like, it's missing, like, 3 functions that I'd actually care about, which is in-app reviews. But even then, I don't like user reviews on Steam. I think they're kind of bad. I almost would rather an in-house curation system where they actually hire a bunch of, like, just QA test people. Effectively, retired QA testers that don't want to do QA testing anymore and say, hey, you want to just kind of hang out on our platform and just go through every single game on the library? And, you know, whenever they get an update, you can sit down and say, like, hey, this sucks, or this is better now. You know, just kind of give a slightly biased but human approach. Kind of a officially sanctioned version of a Steam review, where you can at least somewhat swear by the quality. Because, I'm not gonna lie, like, there are some games that I go to Steam and I look at the recommendation and I'm like, what? Like, like, what's a good example? Gosh, there was a game that was specifically being, put on a pedestal by, hate groups, effectively. Not in, like, an overwhelming or massive way, but it went from being a mixed review to a mostly positive review or something, and you saw a bunch of reviews that are, like, very positive about this game, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's a thing. Okay, let's grab the flashlight, grab the Backpack XL. Not that that really changes anything about my equipment, however, maybe that offsets the potential for me getting overburdened here. But, like, I'd much rather have human beings that I trust giving reviews than just randos on the internet in certain cases. Because I find a lot of randos on the internet tend to be kind of toxic or biased for reasons. I'm just gonna put these away. And I realize that, yes, officially sanctioned reviewers are just as biased, but, like, if you specifically kind of stake your company's reputation on these people not being garbage, you can probably get pretty far. Okay. Fucking Flex GT3, that's going. 4A, but I can't make that yet. The next pistol. Let's see, what am I still researching here? Okay. Heatsink is done. Make the last 2. I'm just trying to get as much research done as possible so that while I'm out and about. We can come back and have more. Okay, so that's done. Where's my knife? Not that it matters. I don't think I'm going to be... Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll try and stab the last boss to death. That'd be really funny. Let's see, that sounds a bit complex. I'd still rather that than Steam reviews. Because, like, Steam reviews very much are mixed bag and of varying quality. Because, like, well, here's a good one. Take No Man's Sky, for example. How would you rank No Man's Sky? At release, a year ago, and now. Because, realistically, the swing on how that game specifically ranks is pretty heavy, and a lot of that is specifically tinged based on people's perspective on the game. That so many people hated it at launch because somewhat the memes, somewhat... let's see. Somewhat the memes, somewhat a lot of people felt like they were cheated. And I can't necessarily say that they're wrong on that one, that, you know, Sean Murray really did overpromise. But 3 out of 10 then, 8 out of 10 now. And I would say that it was a 6 out of 10 maybe at launch, and now it's up to an 8 out of 10. Because I liked it at launch enough, just in kind of like an impartial, like, yeah, that was okay. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. It didn't really make me feel like, holy shit, this is the second coming of Half-Life. Or, gosh, well, I mean, I wouldn't exactly put it on the same pedestal as Valheim. But, like, it was enough. I didn't mind. And so much of people's opinions are kind of based on their perspective at the time, and sometimes the times themselves. And that can actually be quite damaging to games development, a game's review score, just because it's easy to hate on them. Like, what's a good example? Everybody made fun of, was it IGN? Did the review of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. And the review effectively amounted to too much water. That's the one that everybody always throws around as kind of the counterpoint to the argument of, like, you know, that's ridiculous. Too much water is hardly a criticism. But the answer is it's actually a very legitimate criticism. But so many people were defending it kind of offhandedly, without actually thinking on the nuance, because ultimately when it boiled down to it, Pokemon is so beloved it's hard to question. And I think that's kind of valid to some degree, that, like, yeah, Pokemon is real good. And so, like, giving it a bad score just because it chose to have more water than normal seems kind of silly. But I can understand the complaints. And so when I saw a bunch of people specifically, like, dragging the... let's see, dragging the reviewer as a result of, you know, saying too much water, it's like, but it's true. And I think it's just one of those that it's very easy for the average person to just kind of fall into the hype. It's kind of like when Cyberpunk came out. Before Cyberpunk actually officially came out, tons of people probably would have told you it's going to be a 9 or a 10 out of 10 game. No questions asked. And then after it came out, a lot of people would have probably said it was a 2 out of 10 game. And I would say, once again, it was probably like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 game. It wasn't bad. It was vapid and maybe uncomfortable to play because I felt like a sociopath. But there is importance when it comes... You have to place more importance on objectivity. And I don't think most reviewers actually do a very good job of that. When it comes to, like, not like official syndicated game reviewers, but like actual just people reviewing games. And also, a lot of game reviewers also might not even be... What's the range on this? It's like a couple extra feet. That's not bad. But a lot of, like, official game reviewers might not even be gamers, so that can be a little bit of an issue. But, like, what is a gamer at this point anyway? I don't know. Let's see. Would you give the same deal to Anthem? I don't know what I give to Anthem. I'd probably give it, once again, like a solid 6 or a 7 out of 10, give or take. I give it a 6 or a 7 out of 10, with the caveat of... Like, I feel like you could kind of have, like, the objective score be, like, 6 or 7 out of 10. Like, it's an okay game. But then you can kind of have, like, modifiers as part of the score. You know, do you care about EA? Do you hate EA? Because if you hate EA, you're going to hate this. Switch it down to a 3. You know, have kind of the optional, toggleable hate EA flag. And so when reading this review, you can adjust your score accordingly based on your biases. And I could actually see, like, a really good review system take many of these things into account. Because ultimately, final scores are stupid anyway, because so much of this is subjective. Holy shit, I am fast! Also, this nano light is insanely good. I can't wait until we get the final tier. But once again, this is kind of why I stand by the statement of, like, I would love to see a games company try and have, like, a better reviewing system. That's effectively, like, you don't need journalists to write these things. You can just have people sit down and say, like, what they liked about it, what stood out, what was good, what was bad, and then maybe have, like, 4 people try, you know, scale it based on how big the game is. Because recently, so, Outriders came out. Massive problems with its servers, but otherwise the game was decent. And a lot of people review bombed it because it was not playable at launch. An objective reviewer would do that because, you know, that's a shitty thing to do. What they probably do is just hold off on putting out that review until the server issues are solved, or have, like, a giant disclaimer at the top of the review saying, like, hey, servers are super busted, so no review yet, or something. Which is why I don't have a review, or any footage for Outriders, because it straight up wouldn't run on my computer. And having, like, a couple of people that are, like, paid to be decently objective... Ow, 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 ow. That's what I get for... Oh, that door's automatic. That sucks. It was closed, so I figured it was fine, and then it very much was not. Peripheral vision is tough in this game. Let's see. Where was I? I mean, talking about Outriders and some other things. But, you know, that way you can kind of have it, have things checked on whatever platform you're on. Because one thing I have run into in the past is that, like, games that run well on Steam might not run well on Good Old Games or on the Epic Game Store because there's slight version differences. So, for example, I can't actually launch, at least for a while, I could not launch the Epic version of Outriders because it was conflicting with my keyboard software. It's the anti-cheat, which I hate. You know, I hate the fact that needs to be a thing. Like, who cares? Just give us closed BattleNet and open BattleNet and don't even think about it otherwise. Because, like, ultimately, I don't know. I don't feel like cheaters are that heinous. But that might also just be because I am one. I will... Well, I'm doing it right now. You guys are, in fact, watching me cheat at this very moment. Mainly with mods, but still. Okay, so we're kind of rushing through. Oh. Yeah, there's no real game critic certification, so it's a gold rush when it comes to reviews. Yep. And, like, you can see that on YouTube, that, like, it's always a rush to get a video out immediately. I do it. I 100% do it. It's how my It's how my channel came to be. And, like, to some degree, after a certain point, you develop a reputation. So, for example, if I suddenly started, like, really repping Raid Shadow Legends, either people would suddenly be like, you're a sellout, or they'd be like, wait, really? And a lot of that, I think, would be predicated on whether or not I got paid for it. That, yeah, if they paid me and I started shilling it hard, everybody would be like, eh. But no, if I, like, picked that game up and started just playing it for the sake of it, and said, like, hey, I'm gonna give this game a shot on my own and see if it's good. And then when it boiled down to it, it's like, oh, I actually like this game? Then my opinion would matter so much more, because I have somewhat of a reputation at this point that, like, I can be objective on some games, and that, you know, my opinions have some weight because I've put in the time to kind of cultivate the idea that maybe I know a thing or two about what I'm talking about. I've never played Raid Shadow Legends, and they keep trying to sponsor me, and I really wish they'd stop. Because it's not them. What they do is they hire hire PR firms to market for them, who then sponsor videos. It's why they can say that we don't sponsor YouTubers. It's shitty, and they're lying. They're lying through omission. And that's part of the reason why I won't ever play their game. Like, I might play, I don't know, freaking Arc Knights or something, just because they have yet to try and rope me into any scummy marketing schemes, to my knowledge.